Hi, this is Andy Hoffman of CryptoGoldCentral.com, where I publish a daily crypto-focused blog and provide professional crypto consulting services to individuals and altcoin developers alike. This morning, I find myself faced with more questions than I've ever had, given how wild, enigmatic, and disparate the trading cross-currents have been. Everything I've learned about financial markets, sound money, and cryptocurrency tells me Bitcoin is the most important and potentially impactful financial asset ever created, with a long-term outlook as bright as anything I've come across. Conversely, there's nothing certain about the future, not in the long term, and certainly not the short term, and certainly not in cryptocurrency, where momentum, sentiment, and prices can violently change in an instant, often in the absence of material news events. In hindsight, it's easy to say things were expected, like Bitcoin's historic 2017 run or violent 2018 correction. But in reality, no one expected either. As in July of last year, when SegWit had not yet been locked in and the Bcash fork loomed weeks away, most Bitcoin holders, including myself, believed something terrible was about to happen. And none expected the price to rise from $1,800 to $20,000 in the next 5 months. Nor did they expect valuable Bitcoin forks to emerge in the fall or dozens of new altcoins to obtain multi-billion-dollar market caps. And at the top in December and January for altcoins, the consensus was that cryptocurrency would take over financial market dominance and money in a new digital age fostered speed unprecedented in history. In all cases, commentators were wrong, with technical analysts equally as much as fundamental analysts, as in typical momentum chasing fashion. The same charts that predict $1,000 Bitcoin today were predicting $30,000 then. That said, what matters most in crypto or any financial market is where you end up compared to where you started, which often is as much a function of your strategy as your analysis. In my case, I started investing in Bitcoin back in early 2016, transferring it to a Trezor with the help of my good friend Adam Meister as soon as they became available, and continuing to build my position, with particularly big jumps when I sold my silver last summer, right after SegWit locked in, and my gold this winter, after the Bitcoin price had dropped. I took advantage of the forks too, and not only hodled personally, but built a business based solely on recommending investors do exactly what I did, in the process establishing a name for myself in the community. Additionally, I took a significant interest in the unique B-Rhodium crypto dividend I received in January, which I've taken great pleasure in promoting, given my belief it will be one of the few altcoins with a viable, sustainable use case. So I would call myself a success thus far, even if in hindsight I'd have been more successful if I had bought far more at the bottom and sold it all at the top. Hopefully, you too can call yourself a success at this stage, as after a brutal bear market that has taken Bitcoin down 70%, and most altcoins more, only the very early and opportune adopters are in this boat. And equally, hopefully, our long-term vision for Bitcoin plays out fully or even partially, as if it does, we'll all be long-term winners. And as for my strategy, it will continue to be to hodl Bitcoin, collect crypto dividends, earn steam, and seek additional opportunities to capitalize on the cryptocurrency revolution, even in such lean times as these. And of course, to continue educating investors regarding what I see, know, and believe to be truth. In the process, doing my best to weed out lies and propaganda and dispel myths. And as I noted in last week's audio blog, be calmer, kinder, and even more even-keeled. As in the big picture, not only does such angst yield little, if any, benefit, but it exhausts me in a way that even precious metals never did. I have no interest in flailing at windmills, and attacking anything that opposes my views with no clear benefit in doing so is exactly what flailing at windmills is. As for the short term, we are clearly at a crossroads. However, whether it involves conspiracy or conversely commonplace cyclical and secular factors is unclear. As the fact remains, everything about cryptocurrency is unprecedented. For a variety of reasons, most of which I've discussed ad nauseum, I tend to believe we are simply undergoing a healthy, normal correction after a parabolic price rise. In Bitcoin, a mere consolidation of the revaluation it deservedly earned last year after winning the scaling debate, and in altcoins and ICOs, a dot-com-like reckoning for all but the handful with potentially viable and sustainable long-term use cases. That said, after a career of watching and becoming famous for calling it manipulation of stocks, bonds, currencies, commodities, and particularly precious metals, I'd be naive to pretend nothing unsavory is going on, even if such conspiracy has little to do with official intervention and more with major financial players and potentially minors utilizing ultra-thin market conditions, leverage, and derivatives to influence price. To that end, one particularly well-known commentator recently informed me of a theory he is considering about Bitmain, the large Chinese miner that has been at the center of every major Bitcoin controversy to date, in which it is trying to game the market lower, just as it did so on the upside with both Bitcoin and Bcash, so it can increase market share and profits before the next inevitable price rise. And oh yeah, its planned $18 billion IPO in September, which, if it occurs, would be one of the largest IPOs in corporate history. That said, I do believe the Bitcoin market is, for all intents and purposes, legitimate. This in spite of how insane its trading action can be on both the up and down sides, particularly now that leverage and futures have been introduced into the equation at a time when institutional big money has started to enter the game. On Adam Meister's This Week in Bitcoin yesterday, which last night featured Blake Anderson, Josh Nussbaum, and my good friend Mike Krieger, was must-listen material. On it, Mike noted how, aside from the blockchain being the ultimate truth teller, as opposed to precious metals, which are as opaque as any market in existence, Bitcoin's immune system enables it to weed out fraud like none other, such as, for instance, last summer's UASF movement, which called out mighty Bitmain's UAHF and ultimately drove through SegWit. From a big picture perspective, Bitcoin is proving now more than ever that it is indeed the world's most uncorrelated financial market, certainly more so than any I've seen in my 29-year career. The reason being that it is groundbreaking in every way, to the point of likely ushering in an unprecedentedly impactful monetary and transactional revolution. Throw in the nascence of its growth trajectory and relative illiquidity due to just how scarce available for sale physical Bitcoin is, and clearly the most likely explanation for what is occurring is an evolution as exciting, terrifying, and spectacular as any witnessed before. To that end, consider that it took Apple 4 decades to reach $1 trillion market capitalization, which occurred in July. This, at arguably the greatest tech company of our time, while central banks have been continually, parabolically so, printing money and monetizing markets for the past 15 years. Conversely, Bitcoin reached $330 billion in just 8 years, with every imaginable political force attempting to stop it. And even at today's $105 billion, remains larger than all but a handful of the world's oldest, largest companies. As for the consolidation theory, at this point it couldn't be clearer that the $100 billion market cap level I've been discussing since last fall, before CNBC's Brian Kelly said a wall of institutional money is headed for crypto, it is clearly a major financial threshold as opposed to a mere psychological hurdle. Institutions indeed started to enter the market at that level, which occurred last November and has been maintained since, even if on multiple occasions it has had to be defended, like for instance, right now. This is what enabled Bitcoin futures to be launched in December and is currently the driving force behind institutional demand for ETFs, like the SolidX VanEck Fund, which is very likely to be approved in the future, but yielded a major capitulatory event when its approval was delayed by the SEC this week. Perhaps just until September 30th, but perhaps as far as next February. Moreover, Bitcoin's $100 billion resilience is the reason why BlackRock, the world's largest venture capitalist and ETF provider, is forming a crypto working group, why the ICE, or Intercontinental Exchange, is building a mainstream-oriented cryptocurrency trading platform, and why Goldman Sachs bought Poloniex, if indirectly, and is currently considering the creation of an institutionally focused custodial strategy. Conversely, the dot-com-like altcoin bubble, created by the manic, irresponsible diversification of newly minted crypto hedge funds in January, is dramatically deflating, like the dot-coms, permanently destroying nearly everything in its path. Yes, a handful of altcoins and ICOs will survive, but only those with potentially viable long-term use cases, which right now less than 5% can be categorized as. Clearly, this time-tested bubble and bust cycle is playing out in prototypical fashion, with a corresponding impact on Bitcoin sentiment, whose dominance continues to rise even as its fiat price declines. To that end, market cap dominance is a fraud to start with, given how manipulated it can be. That ultimately has no bearing on whether Bitcoin or altcoins are successful. That said, I wouldn't be surprised if Bitcoin dominance rises all the way back to the pre-Ethereum boom level of 85+% before peaking, or conversely, an unforeseen event catalyzes a rebirth of altcoin excitement. Ultimately, I believe the altcoin sector is here to stay, but currently it faces an existential crisis that could last for some time and claim many more victims. I mean, just this week, Bcash was on the verge of a devastating technological collapse that could have had far-reaching consequences for the entire crypto sector. Even if, of course, the bug that was fixed before it could be exploited would have no bearing whatsoever on Bitcoin's, for all intents and purposes, borderline invincible code. I have no doubt the reverberations of this event are part of what is accelerating the altcoin decline this week, which was long overdue given how few of the current altcoin population have viable, sustainable use cases. In a nutshell, we are now amidst an unprecedented period in the history of an unprecedented asset class, and whether you believe it is a conspiracy or commonplace is entirely up to you. Either way, we are definitely at a crossroads that ultimately I expect Bitcoin to yet again survive and as a result be stronger than ever. Thanks and have a great crypto day.